Good afternoon, everybody. It is June the 3rd, 2021. It is 2 o'clock in the afternoon here on the West Coast. Today, I am with Anthony Russell, and he talks about leadership for landlords. So we're talking about property management from a unique perspective today. Anthony is an Army veteran, and he's also a property leader. So his philosophy is basically that to be a good landlord, you've got to be a good leader. So we know leaders can be weak and ineffective. They could be tyrants, dictators, or you could be a really good leader that people like to follow. And that's the philosophy that he applies to property management, believe it or not. So Anthony likes to help people who are starting out in the rental property business, and he teaches them to know the laws and to know what the steps are that they should proceed with if they're starting in the property management business, and to help them to improve as a landlord if they're already in the business. So fascinating conversation today. Let's welcome Anthony Russell right after this.
Welcome to the Newtown Big Dreams podcast, an interview-style talk show that's your gateway to the fabulous and fascinating people who relocated to start a new life. Whether you're new to our podcast or your city, our fellow neighbors from across Canada, North America, and the entire English-speaking world share their stories of reaching new horizons and big dreams. So sit back and relax as we navigate in-depth and intimate conversations with entrepreneurs, thought leaders, executives, creatives, and anyone who can share their story about their Newtown big dreams. And now, here's your host, Luke J. Menkes.
So Anthony, thank you very much for coming on the show today. How is life today in Northeast Ohio?
Oh man, Ohio is always a mixed bag of nuts when it comes to the weather and things like that. We had snow all the way up until recently, so life in Ohio is good, as long as you can tolerate the weather.
Right. I grew up in Toronto.
Oh, we're neighbors.
So not too far from Midwestern U.S. And the winters can be pretty brutal. That's for sure.
Toronto's so clean.
Yeah. It's a very
super clean
for a large city. It's super clean. Yeah, for sure. So you grew up in this part of Ohio, but you left to join the Army for 6 years, and you had a tour of Iraq for 18 months. So tell us what it was like growing up in that part of Ohio. Is it near a big city that we might know about?
So I grew up not far from Cleveland. I grew up in a suburb. I had a pretty great upbringing. My parents, they were your average, middle class, blue collar family. My dad was a tool and die maker. My mom was an accountant. Very, very standard growing up. Not long after I graduated high school, I joined the United States Army to be a military police officer. It just seemed like a cool job. I got sucked in by the romance of the Army, like a lot of us do, and that's all right. It was a good career. I learned quite a bit in the military about leadership and about teamwork and about putting others above yourself. Those are all very important skills to have in life, especially for what I do now. They teach you those things. They start breeding that into you right from the start, right in basic training. They introduce strong teaming skills and putting the team above yourself mentality. And also group punishment. It's a big thing of theirs. If one person screws up, it's your fault kind of thing. So, I did that. And not long after I graduated basic training, I went on to Iraq, where I served 15 months. I got there in November 2006, and I left, I think January or February 2008, something like that.
Wow.
Sorry.
What was that like? That must have been pretty wild.
It was an experience for sure. It's it's a lesson in humility. It definitely teaches you about who you are as a person, about your character. I grew up a pretty standard American kid life, very entitled in this country. You know how it is, for Americans, we have everything here,
Right.
So it was very humbling to see, not just grown adults, but children that literally have nothing, and they're starving over there, and, they're in a war-torn area. It's very, very humbling. I worked very closely with the Iraqi police. I was in a combat focused position. We helped the Iraqi police set up their police stations and run route security, and we taught them to go hunt down bad guys, all types of stuff like that. So we worked hand in hand with them for quite a bit.
Yeah.
Iraq, very interesting.
Sounds like an incredible experience. So you came back in 2007, I'm guessing?
2008. So I got there
2008.
Right at the beginning of November in 2006, and then actually Thanksgiving night of 2006, I convoyed from Baghdad up to Baquba. So that was actually my very first mission, was Thanksgiving night 2006. It was super scary, but that's the nature of the business.
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious, when you get deployed, are you with the same company that you trained with? Is it the same bunch of guys, or is it a new set of guys?
Yeah, so I think that might depend on the job that you do. For the job that I was doing, I trained with, so I got out of basic training, and some of the people I went to basic training with went to my actual unit. I was stationed in Fort Lewis, Washington, which actually, I believe it's Joint Base Lewis McChord now, but that was where I was stationed, was in Washington State. Very, very beautiful if you haven't been up there. But we trained there for a little bit under a year. We trained out in Yakima in the desert. We all trained together with our new unit. And then as a company, there was, I want to say about 150 of us. We all went to Iraq together.
Right.
And then once we got over there, we split up. There was a big chunk of the company was in one spot. And then, we went out and lived in the city in Baquba for a bit. We took over a building and lived out there, or we lived in a building that was taken over out there, and ran our missions out of there. And then we had small squads all over Iraq.
Wow. So, last question I want to ask you about your life in Ohio. What is the current status of the COVID situation with the lockdowns and the masks and all that stuff?
Oh my. Yeah, it's interesting. So I believe that we are allowed to unmask at this point if you've had your vaccination. I've just, since I deal so much with people in the rentals, and I'm constantly in Lowe's and everything like that, I'm fully vaccinated, but I just wear my mask so I don't have to deal with any nonsense of people claiming you're not vaccinated or whatever. I just wear my mask, and it's just too easy. But there's quite a few people out here that are back to normal. We'll say that.
Yeah. Okay. Would you say roughly 50-50?
It's getting there.
We're still required. Here, they still make us wear masks anywhere indoors, even if you're fully vaccinated, which is a little strange to me. But
yeah, that's how it is here too. A lot of businesses still have and some of that might just be a holdover of they haven't taken the signs down yet. But there's quite a few businesses and gas stations that still have the signs that say, wear your mask or don't come in.
Yeah.
And as business owners, that's their prerogative, so I want to go in there and use their services, so I just wear my mask. It's not a big deal.
You just pop it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. So when you got back in 2008, did you get into real estate right away?
No, after I got back, I still had some time on my contract. And since I was a military police officer, I actually had two jobs. I had the combat side, which is what we just spoke about, but I also had a civilian side. When we're back in the United States or back on, out of a combat zone, you're actually a police officer, So I did some time working at the military police, the Provost Marshal's office, they call it. It's the police station on Fort Lewis. I started out as a just a patrol, and then I became a section sergeant of the training area patrol, and then I moved up to an assistant desk sergeant, which was kind of like the second sergeant in charge over the shift at any given time.
Okay.
So I worked pretty heavily with the police station when I got back. And then I actually had planned on getting out of the military and going to flight school. I wanted to use my GI Bill to get into commercial flying. And I went and got my private pilot's license actually while I was in the military still, just to see if I'd enjoy it. But for some reason, it just didn't appeal to me after I got out. The jobs weren't there. It's not like it was 50 years ago when, there was a ton of airline jobs. Yeah. And, they were getting paid $120,000 a year. Like, that's just not the way it is anymore. So right. I went a different path. But, I wanted to get into real estate. It seemed like a good opportunity to be in charge of your own future. I really couldn't tolerate letting a company decide whether or not I was going to have an income. That was really what it came down to. Was I didn't want to offload that responsibility onto them. I wanted to be responsible for that.
Makes sense. I'm curious, how does it work with the military? So you sign a contract, is it like 4 years, 6 years, that sort of thing, and then you're free to leave? How does it work?
For me, it was. I think it depends on the branch, and I can't speak to the other branches. But for me, the way it worked was they offered me a 5-year contract with 3 years of inactive reserve after you get out. So what that means is you sign up, and every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the full 5 years, you're in the Army. You're under that contract, and you do what they tell you. Yeah. And you go where they tell you, and all that. And then after I got out, when my contract had expired, I had something called inactive reserve left over. And the inactive reserve, it means that they can call you back at any time. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to really report in or anything, but they know where you live. And if they need you, they'll call you back. Right. And I happened to have one of those job designations that were getting called back at the time quite frequently. So the state of Ohio made a deal with me. They said if I went out and worked as a sergeant at one of their National Guard units here in Ohio for about a year and a half, that I would be non-deployable and that I would be good to go. They would cancel the rest of my inactive reserve. So I just came back to Ohio, did a year and a half with the Ohio National Guard and worked with some of their great soldiers. And that was it. I was done after that.
Nice. So you're a realtor, is that right?
I'm not a realtor.
So I
am an investor. I have often considered getting my real estate license, but it just never worked out.
Yeah. Well,
I know you're a realtor, though, right?
Yeah, I am. And one of my mentors told me, he said, if you're going to be a land developer, don't be the realtor. Like, let the realtors do their job. Let the landlords do their job. Like, everybody's got a role to play, and we specialize. So you're an expert landlord, and you actually wrote a book called Leadership for Landlords. Is that right?
That's correct.
Tell us about that book. Sounds really interesting.
Sure. So first, let me just echo your point. I absolutely agree. You hire professionals to do professional jobs. That was probably my primary reason for not going into real estate or not becoming a real estate agent, is because I have a great real estate agent. He has worked with me on all of my deals, and you definitely hire professionals to do to do certain jobs.
That's perfect.
That was one of them. The book Leadership for Landlords, it's really geared toward new property managers, new real estate investors, people that are trying to break into this business. I would say that it's any property manager can read it. It doesn't matter if you have 0 units or 1,000 units. If you're a property manager, this book applies to you. Okay. And there are a ton of property management books out there that focus on, how to set up your budget, how much to save, what bills to pay, all that nonsense. Look, I'm not trying to replicate any of that. I'm trying to approach this problem from a different area. There are a lot of property managers out there that have no idea what they're doing. They shake the money tree, C notes fall out of it. They pay the owners, and they think everybody wins. But really, a lot of tenants are suffering. There are a lot of tenants that, are out there and they have to wait 60, 90, 180 days for a repair, something like a leak in their roof. And that's absolutely unacceptable. So I noticed early on, I never set out to create a new way of property leadership. I never set out to change the industry or anything. But I noticed after 10 years of doing this that I had an extraordinarily low vacancy rate. My rents are fine. They're great. We have a great net. We have a very low eviction rate, almost non-existent, in fact. And I feel like there's a reason behind that, because that's not the story that I'm getting from other landlords. Other landlords are out there and they're saying, oh, I've got a tenant who hasn't paid in 3 months, or, I have somebody that, they keep breaking windows and I don't know what to do. And, it's not like I don't face issues with tenants. It just seems that the issues that I face, they get turned really quick. We see the issue, we assess the issue, and then we fix the issue. We don't sit on it for 6 months or hope it goes away, or that the tenant resolves it on their own. Like, those are losing strategies to us, to our business.
Definitely. I agree with you. I've been a landlord and a tenant many times, and it's really a relationship. A lot of people don't really understand that. They look at there's a contract, there's an amount that's being paid, but it's really a relationship. And I found that when you treat people with respect and in a fair way, they just behave better and they treat the property better.
Yes, absolutely. And that's, I think, the biggest disconnect that a lot of landlords have, and they fall into that slumlord category because they don't understand that dynamic between landlord and tenant. And I draw a lot of parallels between sergeants and soldiers in the military in my book, because that same dynamic exists between landlords and tenants. It's in fact, it's even more difficult to lead tenants than it is soldiers, because soldiers are groomed for day one to do what you tell them. You tell soldiers to fight to the death, they'll fight to the death. There's a long running joke in the military, be careful what you tell your new soldiers, because they'll do it. Whereas with tenants, they don't have to listen to you. They can tell you to pound sand. They can tell you quite a few things that you probably don't want to say in your show. And I've had many of that said to me, but you foster a relationship with them in a way where they can trust you. When a tenant knows that they can trust that you're going to do what you say you're going to do, it makes being a landlord extraordinarily easy.
So you mentioned they can trust what you say you're going to do. Tell us some of the tips in this book, how to be a great landlord who's also a good leader.
Sure. So, you can't be afraid of landlording. You can't be afraid of speaking to tenants, and you can't be afraid of confronting tenants on issues. There's lots of things that go into being a good leader, but really a lot of it just boils down to confidence. If you have the confidence to say, I am in this position and I am the person that's responsible, and if you have issues, you will come to me and I will resolve them. And if you can do that, then being a landlord's not that bad. It goes by pretty easy, in fact. And when you do have issues, your tenants know that you're going to resolve them professionally. You're not going to try and do black market deals or whatever to fix a situation. They know that if they're out of line or if their neighbor is out of line, you're going to handle it.
Yeah, totally. So how do you select for good tenants? Because you've mentioned not every tenant is perfect and you do have some issues. You've talked about
Yes.
some of the ways to smooth those over, but how do you deal with someone who's like really difficult and maybe belligerent?
Yeah, so there's lots of ways that I've worked and developed to either try and I don't want to say fix a tenant because that doesn't sound right, but there's lots of things that I've done to try and mediate situations with tenants to get them to stay. My focus is never on the negative. So you will rarely ever hear me go to a tenant and say, if you do X, Y, or Z, I'm going to evict you. Okay. I always go to a tenant with the positive outlook. I always go to a tenant with, hey, I noticed that, you've been late on your rent the last couple of months. And maybe it's only a day or so. And they let me know in advance. Okay. I'll approach that tenant as, hey, look, I can see that you're having issues with the rent. This is not what we agreed to when we signed the lease. Is there something I can do to help you so that you can make your rent on time? And, they'll hem and they'll haw and they'll say, oh, it's a hard time. Yeah. It's a whatever, because they never want to be honest with you. But really what you're doing is you're just guiding them to the solution that you want. So what I'll do is I'll start guiding the tenant toward like, okay, well, if you're having trouble making the rent, look, I'm here to work with you. I want to help you. Maybe this this apartment isn't right for you. Maybe I can help you find another place to go. Maybe, and if it becomes serious where they're actually missing full months or if they're taking like 2 weeks to pay their rent, I'll say, look, this really isn't working out. I don't want to evict you. You're a good person. You have kids, whatever. Let's find a solution that works for both of us, So maybe what I do is I say, look, I will give you half off your next month's rent to help you so you can survive. And in return, what you're going to do for me is you're going to find another place to go. I do things like that all the time to help tenants because, look, evictions are a lose-lose situation. Landlords do not benefit from evictions. They don't. You're going to have hard feelings all around, first off. It's going to scare the hell out of your other tenants if you have a multi-unit building. The person that you're evicting, clearly they're not your best friend. They're going to destroy your property. They could destroy your property. They could, bust up your pipes, throw concrete down the toilet, God knows what else. And on top of all that, they're not paying you. They're going to sit on that apartment as long as they can once the eviction process starts. It's just an all around lose situation. And it's one that should be avoided. So I try to approach it from different angles, from a positive angle, from an angle of, hey, look, I care about you. I care about your well-being. Let me help you. And you know what? Even with the hardest people that I have dealt with, that has been successful.
Yeah. No, it's true. People feel like sometimes they're in a corner and there's no way out and they know they're behind on their rent. And it's better to just try to help them out of this situation. At least even if it costs you a bit of money, it's better than the stress. You don't know what's going to happen. How long does an eviction take if you did have to go that route down there?
So unfortunately, we have had 2 evictions, almost 3, but 2. In 10 years, I've had 2 evictions. The first one was literally the very first tenant I ever had. And they played a game on me and I learned a good lesson. They moved in and it was a friend from school at the time. And they told me they would pay me half of the security deposit and then they'd pay me the rest with the first month's rent when they moved in. And I was dumb enough to believe them. And literally the very first month they didn't pay. So I evicted them. Yeah, it's just how it worked out. Obviously we weren't friends after that, but the entire eviction process for that specific case was very quick. It was about a 3-week turnaround time. Not all cities are that quick. The other city that we've had to do an eviction in, it's about a month and a half to get to court. And then once you have the court date set and the eviction is approved, it's another couple weeks that the judge usually or the magistrate will give them. It's not like you go to court and the judge is like, okay, go get your shit, you're out. It's not that quick. They're usually a couple weeks.
Yeah.
So, and then on top of that, what if that person doesn't leave? Then you have to hire the sheriff to come out and actually remove them from the property, which takes another couple weeks. It can be a long process. And on top of all of that, they're legally in control of the property. They can destroy it as much as they want. And you're also not getting paid rent. So it's really not a good situation all around.
For sure. I remember being a landlord, and people would ask me, what is it like? And I would say, if you've got a great tenant, it's really one of the best jobs in the world. I love it. But if you've got a difficult tenant, it can be super stressful. It's not just the money, but it's the stress. Late awake at night, you don't know what's happening to your property.
Yes.
You don't know how you're going to end it. That can be a real challenge. So tell us a little bit more about some of the military strategies and tricks that you use in the rental property business.
Sure. So a lot of it comes down to just the dynamic between the tenant and me. The military, a lot of people look at the military and they look at sergeants and they see what the media has, painted the military as, which is, hard-nosed, barking orders, you're going to go do this, go over that hill, and I'll shoot you if you don't. And to some extent, a very, very, very small extent, that's what the military is like. But in reality, it's much more modern than that. It's much more about taking care of everybody. If you're a soldier, then your job is to take care of yourself and to take care of your buddies to the left and right. If you're a sergeant, then it's, you're taking care of yourself and everybody underneath you. And it's just how it is all the way up the chain. It's very much about putting everyone else before yourself. That's the mentality of the military leader today. And that's the mentality that I brought into my rentals. You could literally ask any of my tenants. If they called me, I have my phone right here. If they called me right now, I would pick it up, I'd answer it, I'd figure out what their problem was, and we'd solve it, or I'd put in motion solving that problem as quickly as possible.
Sure.
This serves a couple of purposes. One, it shows that I care to the tenant, which is, to me, the most important part, because if they think I care, then they're going to care about my stuff. If they see me weekly, which I show up weekly to my apartments, to just check on the water heaters and things like that. If they think you care, they're going to be like, oh, well, this guy cares about his stuff. I'm going to go out of my way to not destroy it.
Yeah.
So that's the first reason that I will pick up the phone whenever they call. The second reason is, I want to keep them in there. They are generating cash flow for me. And if they're upset, they're going to leave.
Yeah.
And then not only do I have the problem that they originally reported, but also now I have a unit that's sitting vacant, that's broken, that I can't re-rent until it's fixed, you know? So there's a number of things that I employ from the military, but I think the main one is caring, being empathetic to the tenants, making sure that they have a clean, habitable place to live. They have heat, they have water, they have the necessities, and that they're taken care of.
Sure. So you mentioned you go once a week. I know there's different personality styles with landlords and tenants. I've had landlords who lived out of town and they didn't really care. I mean, if there was a repair, they would say, well, go ahead and call someone. They weren't trying to, avoid me, but they weren't really proactive. And I've had other landlords where you can see them peering through the fence and they're showing up at random times. And to me, that was really annoying because as a homeowner and as a tenant, previously, I take care of my space, right? Even if I'm paying rent, I take care of it. So I didn't really like this guy, peering through the gates and knocking on the door at random times and stuff like that. Do you have a routine, you let them know we're coming once a week to check? How does that go?
So that's very important. So for the tenants that have, so for some of our units like duplexes, all the water heaters and everything are inside the building. I would have to access the tenant's unit to get to it, things like that. I don't mess with those tenants. I tell them, hey, look, I usually inspect the water heaters weekly, but I would have to access your unit. So this is on you. If your basement is flooded, let me know and I'll come change your water heater for you. But for the majority of our tenants, they live in buildings where the water heaters and furnaces are in common areas. So it's very easy for me to get in, check those things without being intrusive. I have tenants that I have gone years without seeing. Like we do electronic leasing and things like that. So I'll text them, hey, your lease is coming up. Do you want to renew? Yeah, sure. Okay, I'll send it over, and that's it. And they don't cause any issues for me. I don't cause any issues for them. Everybody's happy. And then I have other tenants that, they see me out there mowing the lawn, or they see me out there checking the water heater, or when I pull in, and they come out and greet me. They say, hey, how's it going? And this is what's going on in the neighborhood. And, the building's great. The first thing I ask every tenant I see is, do you have any issues? Is there anything I can do? First thing I ask. And that keeps everybody happy.
Totally. So they know you're approachable, and they know if there is an issue, you're going to fix it. And you're an easy person to talk to. And like you said, you're not like the movie stereotype of a military person that's just going to bark orders at someone. But you're
right. Yeah, that's the wrong answer.
So do you give advice to tenants in this book?
No. And it's hard to give advice to tenants. Maybe when I first started, I would have taken a swing at that. But the reality of it is that we have tenants across all socioeconomic levels. We have some that are really well off. We have some that are not really well off, and different points in life. It makes it difficult to offer advice to broad advice to anybody. If I had to give any advice to tenants, it would be to try and foster that relationship with your landlord, especially if they seem approachable. Definitely talk to them. It's only going to benefit you. If you have a good working relationship with your landlord, then you might go to the top of the list when when things go sideways for you. They might be willing to help you sooner than later. But yeah, no, I don't have any specific advice for tenants other than pay your rent.
Right, pay your rent on time.
Report your issues and take care of the place. Report issues when you see them and pay your rent on time. That's my best advice.
Right on. So over the years, I'm sure your intuition has been honed. Can you give us any tips about how to screen for a good tenant? Someone who's going to have at least a cordial relationship with you, pay on time, take care of issues, or at least report them to you. You mentioned, I think you said it was a high school friend that just kind of parked himself there, and it was kind of a disaster. Have you learned anything about how to screen people and, kind of gauge what type of a tenant they're going to be? Yeah.
So that first person was my initiation by fire into being a landlord and screening tenants properly. I learned really quick. But it is something that I have cultured over the years of what I look for, and I've tailored it specifically for certain things. The first thing I would say is, if you're screening tenants, screen them all equally. Do not do certain, so for example, it would be easy for me to say, okay, well, in our mid to high income tenant areas, I only screen for this. And then in our low income areas, I screen for this, this, and this. But that's setting yourself up for a lawsuit. I wouldn't recommend that. Equal opportunity is big, and you don't want to be the person that's on the news for, discriminating against somebody. So develop a plan, develop a set of things that you're going to look for, and look for those specific things. I specifically look for if anybody has any evictions in the last 3 to 5 years. That's a huge red flag for me, obviously.
How can you tell? Do you have a registry that lists names?
So for evictions, it can be tricky. A lot of people will go through a background check system, which is great. However, it doesn't always pick up everything. If you're my tenant today and I have just filed for eviction against you, that most likely will not show up in a lot of these background checks. At least that's what I've seen. So what I tend to do is, whenever I'm interviewing people, I will put them through a normal background check, which will include, bankruptcies and collections and evictions and things like that. But I will also go to all the local city. Most, if not all cities at this point, have a web portal where you can go and look at their court docket, and you can see if there's any. You can usually do just a search by name, and if you're interviewing somebody for a rental, you should have taken their ID. Make sure you get a picture of their ID, or they snap a picture of it and text it to you or something, and then put them through the normal background check, but also go to all the surrounding cities, including the one you're renting in, and run their name through there and see if there's any open cases. Because if there is, it's likely that they're in the process of getting evicted and they're looking to jump ship. I have run into that quite a bit. That's a game that a lot of people try and play with me, but I catch them. So evictions, that's a big one, last 3 to 5 years. I also look for 2.5 times the rent and income. That just makes sure that this is kind of a sore spot with a lot of people, because they say, oh, well, I can afford to live, I can afford the rent. And I'll say, yeah, but as soon as your car breaks down or, you got to eat, guess what? You're not going to pay your rent. You got to pay for other things too. So I look at evictions, I look at income levels. I also look at collections. If you have active collections, something that has not been paid, that is an instant no-go for me. I will not bring somebody in. And a lot of times they'll say, oh, well, it's just, $500 to T-Mobile or whatever. I'll say, well, it's $500 to them now. It'll be $500 to me tomorrow. If you don't pay your bills, it's not going to happen. I do, however, if somebody has had an eviction, a long time ago, or if they have paid off their collections, or, whatever, things like that, I do make exceptions for people if they strike me as an honest person and it has paid off. I have a couple, I won't go in detail too much to protect their privacy, but I have a couple, they were homeless before they came to me. They were living in community shelters. They did not have the best background ever. But I spoke with the guy and with his wife, and they seemed like a good people to me. I used my gut, and I ended up renting to them, and they're great. They have paid every month on time for a couple years now, and no issues whatsoever. They help me if I need it. They're good people. So
That's awesome.
Take chances sometimes.
For sure. And I guess if you did see something on the credit reports or eviction history, if it wasn't an automatic no for you, you probably asked them, can you explain what happened? Can you tell me what the story? And you go from there.
Yeah, so I've had a lot of people, and I do mean a lot of people, where they're in the middle of an eviction and they try and pull one over on me. And I'll ask them, I'll say, hey, I was going over your background check and I noticed that somebody with the same name as you is being evicted from, this property over here. Is that you? And they'll say, oh, no, that's not me. That's somebody else and this and that. And I'll say, okay, well, no problem. It's funny, landlords, I'm sure you're a landlord. Whenever you go to list a unit online, you put your phone number down, right?
Yeah.
Well, when somebody is in the middle of an eviction, it says their name and their home address on the city court docket. So all you have to do is just copy that address out of the court docket, put it into Google, and look for somebody renting that property in the past, and you'll get the phone number of the property manager, or the owner, and you could just call them directly and say, hey, I've got this person. Can I text you their ID? Can you tell me if this is, your tenant? And I swear to God, it always comes back that that's the person, and they end up owing like $6,000 to this previous landlord or whatever, and
right.
I told one lady, I said, oh well. I asked her, I said, is this you? I see your address and name popped up in the court docket. Is that you? And she's like, yeah, I don't know why that's in there. I said, oh, well, how about give me your number to your landlord? And, I'll give him a call and just make sure that it's not you, and then we'll be good to go. And I'll be happy to send you a lease. And she told me, oh, I don't have his phone number. I said, you don't have your landlord's phone number? I said, what happens if there's a fire or something? She's like, oh, well, I don't know. He just handles it. I said, oh, really? So I did that. I looked up his phone number via the court docket address that was posted, and Yeah, it was definitely her, and she owed a ton of money. So
Wow.
I messaged her back. I said, "Hey, look, here's your landlord's phone number. You should give him a call because he's really upset with you." That was the last I ever heard of her. She never got back to me after that.
Yeah, that's tough. Now, I don't know
Yeah.
what it's like in Ohio, but when I lived in Florida and where I live now in this beautiful little town in Western Canada, a large chunk of people are from other cities, like really far. Sometimes like a 4-hour drive, sometimes like 2,000 miles away. So do you get much of that? And if so, would you do searches in those towns?
Yeah, so I've actually only run into this. Yes, I do have a lot of requests from out of state, but because of the condition that I keep my properties in, we rarely ever have to hustle for tenants. Usually, when I list and I'm assuming that I'm the exception, not the rule. So if you're looking to break into real estate or rental properties, don't expect this. But I've been fortunate enough that over all of our properties, whenever I list them, we usually have, somewhere between 8 and 14 responses of people that are interested in that apartment. A subset of those will be from out of state. But I usually tell those people, hey, look, I'm going to show the property on this day. I usually set it up like an open house, depending on the unit.
Yeah.
I'll say, hey, I'm showing the property at this day, at this time. You're welcome to come by, or you're welcome to have a proxy come by. I'm really not going to waste a lot of time trying to find somebody for this because I know we'll have a large response and I will likely pick somebody out of that pool. I've only actually had one person out of all the years I've been doing this actually go through the full process. It was that deal. It was that same deal. I had a lot of people respond and they sent a proxy because they lived in Massachusetts or something. And the proxy did like a phone video of the apartment, and I spoke to the person over the phone briefly, and it all worked out. They ended up renting from us, and they're very good people. They're still one of our tenants today, and they don't miss rent or anything. They're good people.
Great.
But to answer your question, I do also do searches on those people as well. States are set up similarly. You can go into other states and look for those things. All that information is free.
So let's summarize your book, Leadership for Landlords. Who should buy this book, and where can we find it?
So this book is really geared toward property managers at all levels, but if I had to give it to anybody, it would be to somebody that wanted to break into property management, 1 or 2 units, maybe up to 10 or 20 units, just something that they're doing themselves. This book is meant to make their life easier. It's written to help them put themselves in the proper mentality for being a land leader, for being a property leader, That's who I really wrote this book for, because that's me. Right. I fall into that category. We have, a dozen units or so, and we fluctuate. But, I wrote this book for me because this is what I would have wanted when I started. Somebody to say, hey, look, this is how you treat tenants, and this is how you run a successful business. The book is really going to be beneficial for those people. And I say it's for property managers at all levels, though, because I don't care if you're managing 1,000 units or 1,000,000 units. If you're dealing with tenants, they are not tenants. They are human beings. They are in large part the reason you're in business. If there were no tenants, you would not be a property manager because you would have no one to pay you. So stop treating them like warm bodies or like money trees that you shake. Get out there and be empathetic and treat these people right the way they deserve to be treated.
For sure. So how do we find the book?
The book is going to be released later this month, June 2021. And it's going to be on Amazon and a few other places. I'm hoping to have the audiobook done here soon as well. They should release together. Yeah. We're also going to have physical copies available that you can order through Amazon as well. Okay.
So we'll put links to that. This episode is going to come out probably early July. So hopefully we've got live links at that time.
Yes.
So, Anthony, thank you so much. I've learned a couple of good tips myself. Haven't been in the business many years, but it's always good to hear perspective from someone in a different part of the continent and what you've learned from military and applying that to real estate.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I really want to get the word out there about how to treat people right. That's really important to me. And I really appreciate you being part of that journey.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Newtown Big Dreams podcast with your host, Luke Menkes, and his authentic guests. And we love our listeners and hope you subscribe now to learn more about the amazing journeys of our incredible guests who relocated to find a new town, big dreams. And remember, make your dreams big.